Welcome to the Gracewriters podcast, Christian writers changing popular culture. Hit subscribe on your favourite podcast player so you never miss an episode. And find show notes, useful links and a full transcript at gracewriters.com. Today on the podcast, we welcome creative writing teacher and author, Nikki Florence Thompson. I'm Belinda Pollard. I'm an author, editor and publishing consultant with a theology degree and 20 years in the publishing industry. Find links to my books, blogs and online courses at belindapollard.com.
Hi, I'm Donita Bundy, and for the past 20 years, I've been using my theology degree to underpin my preaching and my public speaking, and more recently to inspire my young adult, urban fantasy, Armour of Light series. You can find out more about this and all my other projects at donitabundy.com.
Nikki Florence Thompson has an MA in creative writing and a PhD in literature. She teaches creative writing at the Australian Catholic University in Brisbane. She is also a blogger and published author of the memoir Fight, Flight and Faith, which tackles grief and anxiety at a very personal level. Welcome aboard, Nikki.
Thanks so much, guys. So lovely to chat with you.
Nikki, lots of people would love to write. I hear it all the time when I'm moving around and meeting people in different places. What can you tell them, though, about figuring out where to start?
Cool. Well, first of all, I always say to students, read. Writers are only writers because they're, first of all, readers. And reading is like it's like the energy that we consume. We need to be reading to be outputting writing. I would say, first of all, figure out what you love reading, because that's probably what you love writing, and read avidly in that area. Secondly, writers don't just suddenly one day become writers. They are already usually writing in some capacity, as in journaling, writing down anecdotes, telling stories, even verbally. You'll be already doing this process of writing. It's just formalizing it. What form do you want that to take as it goes into the world and to readers, and figuring that out partly through that reading process, and then starting to take more steps forward from there. Yeah.
Among the Gracewriters, the members of Gracewriters, we have a whole lot of different writers. We've got novelists, non-fiction writers, memoirists, copywriters, bloggers. We've got one person writing an opera libretto. We've got all manner of different forms. We've got poets. We've got songwriters. So many different forms. Of all of these different forms and all the different topics, how do we choose?
Well, I'm not one of those people who thinks you have to stick to just one genre. I think you can mix it up, and different seasons of life will find you writing in different areas, although at first it's probably good to figure out where you want to start and stay in one zone for a little while so that you can focus your energies there. I think it's a combination of factors. It's what you feel compelled to write at the time. It's, again, like that enjoyment factor, what you enjoy for writing. I know I got the advice years ago when I was doing my PhD, if you're not passionate about this, you're not going to last. Like, don't try and force yourself into writing something that's not actually something that you're really committed to. So it's that commitment level. It's what opportunities do you have for people to read that? I guess experimentation, really. It's not a neat process. So do some experimenting, dabble in the different forms and see what sticks. It's not a hard and fast answer, but I think
It's interesting because I was a journalist initially, and so I naturally gravitated to writing nonfiction and things where I interview people and create stuff, but I really, really wanted to write fiction and would not give myself permission to do it. So I'm guessing that there's probably quite a few writers out there or pre-writers out there who are thinking, oh, this is what I really want to write, but I'm not allowed to write that.
Yes, not allowed to. And then you've got to ask why. Why are you not allowed to? Is that nobody? That's that kind of condemning voice that so many writers have that put these restrictions on us, or that have to do with us worrying and those sort of things. So you then did change from journalism to writing fiction at some point?
It's interesting because the thing that actually finally got me over the line was a deadline. So I started entering competitions, and that gave me deadlines. And as the old journalist in me rose to the deadline and stopped thinking about whether I was allowed to or not.
And deadlines are so good. In fact, I do experience that competitions are one of the best ways to cut your teeth and just to get you trying things out and producing. So maybe set yourself some deadlines in different forms and see what happens. If you really want to do it and have something to write, it'll come to the surface. And if not, then maybe that's a good piece of advice. Yeah.
So Nikki, for people who are starting out, how do you find time in a busy life already to write?
Again, I think there's this misconception that writers just sit at their desks undisturbed with a candle and, a glass of wine or a cup of tea and never move. Like, it's not like that. So I think that you can find pockets of time to write. Like, you can always carry around a notebook or your phone, however people do it. I always tell my students to carry something, whether it's usually their devices these days, or I tell them to carry a notebook, but I don't know if they do. And just jotting down thoughts as they come to you. They'll often come to you after a shower or going for a walk or that sort of thing. So keep harvesting your material in those pockets or when you don't have much time. And then there's always, I guess, patches in everyone's days or weeks where they've got a bit more time. Maybe then take those notes and try and write some more long form stuff. There's all different methods that I'm sure you guys are familiar with for writing. Like, some people recommend just 20 minutes every morning or every night, and it will then grow, or a page a day. Some writers do a page a day, or different. I find word limits quite helpful when I'm on a project. So I'm going to write 1,000 words today, or 2,000 words today would be quite a lot. But just finding those little tricks, because nobody's life is ever going to be a clean slate unless I don't know. And if you do have that time, often it's too much of a luxury that you don't feel compelled to write. Often it's the deadlines or the pockets that force you. Like, I think my writing has been so much more efficient since having 3 kids, because I know that when I'm sitting down and I've got a few minutes, I've got to make it count. So
And do you have any resources or books you can recommend to help people get started in writing?
Yeah, sure. I love books on the craft of writing, because while writing is it's something intuitive to us if we want to write, it's also a craft that can be learned. So I love Anne Lamotte stuff. So Bird by Bird is an excellent writing book. It's great on instruction, but it's also just beautifully written. So you've got the double whammy there of learning skills at the same time as imbibing the voice of a really gifted and eloquent writer. She also talks about some of the mental challenges that writers face. So the inner critic, you can't do this, nobody's going to like it, all this sort of thing, all these thoughts that sit on your shoulder while you're writing. She talks about them quite comically, and so she helps you tackle that as well. So I like Bird by Bird, and the premise behind that is she talks about this story of her brother when he was younger having to do an assignment on birds, and the dad says, just take it bird by bird, like, don't write about all the birds at once, just go through different bird at a time. And so you just tackle your writing like one task at a time, and you will move forward. So that's a really great one. I like Stephen King's on writing, even though Stephen King's books themselves freak me out and I can't handle that sort of thing. He's again really good. These are sort of the sort of storytelling textbooks. So it's not like you're being whammed over the head with a textbook. You have to do it like this. They come to it slant, and they really teach you. There's heaps more on my bookshelf, but I think the main thing is also just reading as a writer. That's what we talk about in our course that we do, reading as a writer. So when you're reading, think about all the decisions that the authors are making all the time. why did they begin that way? Why did they stop at the end of the chapter that way? And you can be sort of taking notes, like literally taking notes, or just in your head, or would I have begun that differently? Why did that work? Did that not work as well? Like read as a writer, almost like you're picking it apart to the bones and seeing the skeleton of how the writer has made this book. So I think that's one of the best ways to learn, and do that in the genre that you're writing in. So if you're a poet, then read poetry that is excellent poetry, or that you really love, and why does that work? Or if you're a nonfiction writer, why did they start? You can almost take yourself on a creative writing course if you're dedicated enough to doing this, unpicking. Like, I know when I wrote my recent book, I looked at the memoirs I love, and I literally went through and thought about the structural decisions different people had made, and then I didn't mimic them or take any one form, but I thought, I like how they started there, and I like what this person did with their chapter titles, and then I kind of took inspiration from that.
So once we've got started, Nikki, and we're moving along through the process, how can we continue to grow in confidence and skill over time? And I think I'm also thinking specifically of that problem of self-doubt, because all the writers that I meet struggle with it. And it's such a big topic. Even as we become more able, how do we tackle that?
Yeah, I'm still tackling that now. I think other people around you are good, so this group is good. I always tell students writing groups are really good, because everybody is in the same boat. No matter how far along the track you are, actually, you will always struggle, I think anyway, with an element of self-doubt. And so having people around you can go, I feel like that too, or I'm having this issue. So sort of finding your people and having some people that can support you. I know my husband's a historian, he's also a writer, and we often when we're working on drafts, one of us will say, I'm having that day where everything isn't working and it's never going to go anywhere. And then we say to each other, this is just part of the writing process. Tomorrow will be the day you break through, because there's almost in the writing, I don't know if you guys have found that, always this like really bad day followed by often a good day. So just having him around to help me is good. So finding someone who you can talk to, and I think writers can be a bit can often be those kind of solo people, or they can feel like they're on their own. So reaching out to other creatives, just knowing that it's part of the process, I think is enough. So things like Anne Lamott's book, even Stephen King, all of them talk about this. It's a universal writer's condition, imposter syndrome. It's just part of our DNA, but just knowing that if you feel like that, if you feel discouraged, it's not abnormal, but also just keep going, because it's a messy thing. Writing is messy. You're building something. It's like, I don't know if you guys watch Grand Designs, but when you're building a house, there's always like the rain will come and the roof will fall off and everything. Like I even said to my husband recently, this is when the roof's flying off. Like with publishing my book, I'm like, it's not working. So just knowing that that's part of the process. Nobody actually writes a book just easily. It's not easy. It can be exhilarating and wonderful and one of the funnest things to ever do. And it can be so, so hard. Words are hard to find. So, yeah.
And I think even if you've had a book or a writing piece that's been massively successful, then there's the pressure of the next one.
I know. I was actually going to message a mentor today, actually, because I was feeling these feelings with my book coming out, and to say to her, how do you handle this? And I think it's always going to be that, because there's always going to be someone better than you. There's always going to be someone whose book sells more than you. There's always going to be someone further ahead than you. It's just life. Like it's like anything, and your mind's going to play. But I guess that's where, as Christians as well, trusting God's path for you, praying about it. Like I think we can often feel like we shouldn't pray about writing, like it's selfish or something, which is just stupid, because we should pray about everything. God says, bring everything to me. So praying about those feelings, I often do, or just knowing that writing isn't going to be a smooth path, because life isn't a smooth path. There's going to be great moments, there's going to be really hard moments, but if it's something that you feel called to do, that you can do, and that will help others, and thinking about who it's going to can also help. Like, who are you serving? Why does this story need to be told? Then just keeping on going, but there's no miracle cure for it.
Yeah, I think too it's important to remember that when we're not going to please all the people. I guess that's the importance of actually discerning at the start, when in that prayerful conversation with God, like, what am I writing for? What is my purpose? What is the message, and who am I writing to? Because when you get that feedback from people who are not the target audience, and they're not going to like it, it's perhaps easier then to take that on board, to say, well, thank you, but there are also people that this does actually feed into, and it helps to know you're just not going to please all the people all the time, and there are going to be people who just really don't like what you've written, and that's okay.
And particularly, I think, in the age we live in, like, we have given everybody an avenue for an opinion, which is a good thing. But it's also really hard. Like, we get to give feedback, and it's always a mixed bag. I remember when I had my first baby, there was this great midwife at the hospital who gave us a talk as we were leaving. Sorry, this is relevant. And she said, you're not all mums that you're going to agree with. You're all going to have different, methods. And she's like, look, it's like me. Some birds like me and some birds don't. I just thought that was so cool. And I've always got that in my head. Like, you just got to be at peace with, some people will like your work, some won't. But it's not easy when you actually face it.
When I get particular types of criticism and I'm concerned that there's a kernel of truth in it, and then I'm worrying at that in my classic overthinking style and trying to think about how I can take the good from that criticism and how I can turn it around and how I can improve my writing, because I'm always worrying away at that like a little dog at a bone, trying to improve my writing. And what I can end up doing is spiraling down into this puddle of insecurity and inactivity in terms of my writing. But if I switch it around and remember, hang on, why am I writing? I'm writing to help people. Like, fundamentally, all of my genres that I write and all the stuff I'm writing to help people. Exactly. If I switch away from thinking it's got to be perfect to thinking, hang on, who am I helping? Let me think about them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be perfect to help them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have to do that almost every writing session. So it's not it's not a one and done. It's a
and that's the importance too of maintaining a healthy prayer life. Like you said, Nikki, like praying, not only praying every day for who we are and the world that we live in and the community and the family that we belong to, but it's about about the words that we're passing on, and if we get into the discipline, it's just like, it's a dirty word, but if we get into the discipline of prayer and bringing prayer to our writing, I think, as you said before, Nikki, that's really going to help us. And like you said, Belinda, turning our focus away from the negative and the perfection, and turning to the perfection who is inspiring the work. So I just think it's without the prayer we're lost, because it's our relationship connection, and it's where we get our inspiration from. And so I hear what you're saying, and it's so true. I'm in the same boat with both of you, and I think some days it's about doing the discipline when you feel like it. It's like when you sit down and write when you don't feel like it. Sometimes you just sit in and pray and get your Tushy glue down and get your fingers on the keyboard and your mind talking to God.
Nikki, sometimes the ones that are discouraging us are not the people out there, the critics and the reviewers. Sometimes they're the people in our own house or our friends and family. And some writers actually struggle to even find a little space to write because of opposition from their own dear ones. Wow. Any tips for how to push through that?
That's a tough one. So you mean if people in your own family are, why are you even doing this? And I guess I think it's important to find someone who can support you, so someone you can talk to. I'm just big on that because I think we shouldn't have to battle things alone. Well, there's nothing, as far as I can see, there's nothing criminal or bad about writing. I don't think it's something you should stop doing. I guess just finding the way in each situation that'll work. Yeah, that's a tricky one.
It is tricky, and I'm sorry to hit you with that difficult question, but
okay.
I know that, and like some people live in dysfunctional marriages, just
Yeah.
stating it,
stating
it baldly, and they need that support. And I guess that's a good thought that you've raised there, to find the support elsewhere. I would even suggest that sometimes the support that you find might even be in places like Twitter, which has become a bit of a meeting place for writers. So possibly you can connect with other writers there for encouragement without necessarily drawing attention from.
Yes, and that's where the internet's our friend, like for all the criticism of social media. I don't use Twitter just because I've never figured it out, but Instagram, I've met so many of my connections and have been really encouraging, and often people are in the same boat as you and will post something that as writers we express by writing, and that can be really helpful. So I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah, as I said, my husband's a writer and a historian. He's not on social media. So for us, I have to be careful how much time I spend on social media, because he's not a huge fan of that, but everybody's different.
The stuff that you've written some very personal material about your own family grief and your anxiety. What tips would you have for other writers trying to decide how far to go with personal material? How do they protect their mental health? How do they protect their privacy while also creating something that's genuinely going to be deep and rich and helpful to a reader?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a few things with that. I think if, for instance, if you're writing on social media, first of all, or a blog, I think it's a good idea to always let your writing rest, even for a day or a night, because often if we're writing about things like grief or mental health or these sort of sensitive issues, particularly if we're writing out of, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, we might be writing out of a moment of intense, emotion. I think it's always good just to, you don't necessarily have to censor that in any way, but just to wait a day and look at it afresh, because we can often see things differently when we give them a bit of time to rest. I always say letting your writing rest, and that kind of gives you just that little element of something comes out in inspiration, but then you can use your analytical brain to then think, okay, is this what the message I want to put out into the world? Is it, like for me, I like to put my anything I put out, I like to put it through a bit of a filter, like even if it's really sad, which is the reality of the world, does it still offer a glimpse of hope, or is it in tune with my overall message, which is Jesus is with you? And I don't always do that perfectly, but just once you've written something, letting it rest can be a good way. If it's about other people, you do have to be a bit careful. Just if it's anything defamatory, like one of my favorite writing teachers, Marion Roach Smith, that's another hint. She's got the memoir project. I don't know if you guys have heard of her.
I've heard of her, yes.
She talks about never writing out of revenge or spite, because it's just, it's not good. It's not going to help anyone necessarily. I mean, write in your journal in private, talk to God about it, journal it and write it out to him. But if it's going to be something that's defamatory of anyone or anything like that, I'd be really careful. But there are some things, I guess, that are really sensitive topics that we still want to write about. Like, I don't have any experience of writing about abuse or anything like that, but there are people who do and who need to, and it will help other people. But just be really, really careful. And you could ask someone you trust to read it before you publish it. If you're doing it in like an online space, obviously in a book, you've got more lead time. But even with my stuff, I was saying to you guys earlier, not on this interview, that I had to get the key players just to look at it. I got, before I even sent my manuscript that I've written, which is about anxiety, before I even sent that to a publisher, I had my two best friends and my parents looked at it later. I had my two best friends who I trust a lot. And I said, can you read this? Is there anything in here that gives you a red flag, both theologically and emotionally? One of my best friends is a psychologist, so that was really helpful. And when they got back to me and said, no, that it's good to go, I felt like I'd had people that know me, but also have good brains on their heads and, solid Christians to look at it and go, no, there's nothing in here that, and they were just a little bit outside my family as well. My husband read it as well, and he's critical in a good sense, but it was good to have just that team.
So, Nikki, the Gracewriters tagline is Christian writers changing popular culture. Do you think there are ways that writers can influence society?
Yes, I do. I don't like to think too didactically. I think more, probably because I think more from a storyteller's point of view. So I think stories are so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Stories can get to people's hearts in a way, and that's not original to me. People have said this for millennia, that stories can get to people's hearts in a way that facts, pure facts without a story angle often can't. So I think being able to tell our God stories is a way to influence culture, particularly if we tell them sincerely and in as skilled a way as possible. Yeah, I'm just personally, I'm not someone I don't want to beat people over the head with my message. I want it to make it winsome and flavoursome, and hopefully then it will help people.
Winsome and flavoursome, that's nice.
Do you think it's possible to deepen and test our own faith throughout the writing process? And what has been your personal experience of this?
Yeah, I think it's when you do any art form or any task in life, bringing it to God, you can always enrich and deepen your faith story. Actually, a before and after tale here. I think I used to think that my writing and God were very separate, and I felt quite bad about it. I always had this desire to write, but I didn't want it to become an idol. And then in doing that, I think I made my kind of legalism my idol. But in bringing like my latest project to God, and every time I wrote, I'm not like a hyper spiritual way or anything, but I just said, God, please, can you continue to help me to say what I'm meant to say here, or help me to say this story in a way that shows your love. And it gave me that feeling that at the end, well, whatever happens with this, me and God have done the best we can. We don't want to divide different areas of life from God. And I think we can so easily do that. We don't want to worship the art form either, but worship the creator of the art form, and then the art form will be better, hopefully.
And Nikki, do you have any final suggestions or tips?
Reading. Reading those craft books, joining a writing group or this sort of a group is great. Just writing, you're only going to grow in writing. It's like my son's really talented at piano, but he's only in year 2, but for the first year or 2, he just didn't practice. Now he started practicing, and it's just beautiful to behold, because his natural talent is turning into something, but he has to make mistakes. He has to sit at the piano and figure out the notes, and they get better. So the
grace notes.
Yeah. So keep playing your notes, keep playing your scales, and trusting them to God. And then I think that's all we can do. And then learning to let go, which I'm not very good at. I'm in that stage of trying to learn to let go and give it over to God.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Beautiful material there, Nikki. Thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
At my website, nikkifthompson.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about I pray for you and the Gracewriters before we finish?
Excellent.
Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for Nikki and for the things that you have taught her through the process of writing, through the process of living life, through the process of teaching other writers. We thank you so much for all the abundant ideas and suggestions that she has given us there today. And we pray that they will mightily bless those writers out there who are listening and looking for maybe just that piece of advice or encouragement or redirection. And we do pray your blessing upon all of the Gracewriters, that you will strengthen and sustain and encourage and lead them. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Nikki Florence Thompson, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Donita Bundy. I'm Belinda Pollard, and we will see you next time on the Gracewriters podcast. Gracewriters is run by volunteers, and we're incredibly grateful to those who have contributed financially to help keep this ministry running. Thank you so very much. If you have enjoyed this podcast and you'd like to help, please go to gracewriters.com and look for Donate in the menu. Continue today's conversation in our free online forum and find useful articles, links and resources at gracewriters.com.